I want you to imagine a scenario. It is a trap, and you are currently standing right in the middle of it. If you keep your money in the bank right now, you are bleeding to death. Real inflation. I'm not talking about the government numbers. I'm talking about the price of meat, insurance, housing, and energy is eating your savings at a rate of 7% to 10% a year. You're becoming poorer by the hour just by standing still. Follow the traditional rules? You get left behind. But there is a signal. A massive, flashing red light that just went off on the geopolitical stage. A signal that tells us exactly what time it is. On January 3, 2026, at exactly 2:01 a.m., American helicopters touched down in Caracas. 30 minutes later, Nicolas Maduro was in custody. And in that moment, $17.3 trillion worth of oil reserves changed hands. Now, the headlines told you this was about democracy. They told you it was about stabilizing a failed state. They told you it was about fighting tyranny. But I need you to look closer. I need you to look at the balance sheet. Because this wasn't a peacekeeping mission. This was a margin call. This was the next inevitable step in a pattern that has destroyed empires for over 2,000 years. A pattern so predictable, so mathematically certain, that once you understand it, you will see it everywhere. Right now, the United States national debt stands at over $38.5 trillion. It is growing by $6.1 billion every single day. Interest payments on that debt just crossed $1 trillion annually, more than we spend on our entire military, and while the media distracts you with political theater, 142,000 millionaires have fled traditional wealth centers this year alone. That is the largest voluntary wealth migration ever recorded in history. This is not a coincidence. This is stage 4. We are watching a 7-stage cycle that toppled the Dutch guilder, the British pound, and the Roman denarius before us. The Venezuela raid isn't the beginning of the story. It is a symptom of an empire in the late expansion phase, desperately grabbing real resources to maintain the illusion of financial stability. What comes next is already written in the history books. The only question is whether you will be on the right side of the greatest wealth transfer ever recorded. Stay with me. Because in the next few minutes, I am going to deconstruct this machine. I am going to show you exactly which stage we are in, why this smart money is running for the exits, and most importantly, I am going to give you a specific, actionable protocol to protect yourself. Let me show you something that, once you see it, you cannot unsee. Throughout the last 2,000 years, empires rise and fall following the exact same pattern. Same sequence. Same stages. Same outcome. It doesn't matter if we're talking about Rome in 265 AD, the Dutch in 1780, Britain in 1931, or America right now. The pattern is identical, and it acts like a force of nature. It works like this. Stage 1 is the sound money foundation. Every empire begins the same way. With honesty. The money is real. It's backed by something tangible, gold, silver, hard assets. Because the money is sound, it attracts commerce. Trade flows through the empire. Wealth accumulates. Productive capacity expands. People build factories, they build farms, they educate their children. The society becomes rich through genuine productivity, not financial engineering. This is the Golden Age. This is America in the 1950s. We owned 2/3 of the world's gold. We made everything. We were the creditor to the world. Then comes stage 2, expansion and the good life. Once the empire is wealthy, it begins to expand. Not just military expansion, but social expansion. We build massive infrastructure. We create social programs. We build the interstate highway system. We launch the Great Society. These programs are initially funded by the wealth created in stage 1. The society feels prosperous. The middle class grows. Quality of life improves. But there is a subtle shift happening here that nobody notices. The empire starts spending more on maintaining its prosperity than creating it. Consumption begins to outpace production. Slowly. Almost imperceptibly. This leads to stage 3, overextension and debasement. To maintain its global position, the empire must project power. Military might becomes expensive. We have to protect trade routes. We have to maintain overseas bases. We get involved in conflicts like Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. The costs rise faster than the tax revenue. So the empire makes a fateful choice. Instead of cutting spending, which is politically unpopular, or defaulting on obligations, which is embarrassing, it debases the currency. In ancient Rome, they shaved silver from the coins. In modern times, we print money. In 1971, Nixon closed the gold window. That was the moment we officially entered Stage 3. We moved from money backed by gold to money backed by credit. The credit card was issued. Initially, this seems to work. The system continues functioning. But trust is eroding, and that brings us to Stage 4. Desperate resource acquisition. This is exactly where we are right now. The empire realizes its currency is losing credibility. The debt is too high. The interest payments are eating the budget alive. So, it does what all empires do at this stage. It goes after hard assets. It stops relying on financial power and starts using kinetic power to secure natural resources, strategic materials, anything with intrinsic value. Regime change becomes about controlling oil. Military operations become resource extraction missions. This is why the Venezuela event is so critical. Venezuela holds 303 billion barrels of proven oil reserves. At $57 per barrel, that is $17.3 trillion in collateral. On January 3rd, when the United States took control of those reserves, it wasn't an act of politics. It was an act of economics. It was the empire saying, our credit card is maxed out, so we are taking the collateral. But here is what makes this pattern so devastating. Stage 4 doesn't stabilize the empire. It's a temporary patch on a systemic wound. Because the fundamental issue, spending exceeding productive capacity, hasn't been addressed. All Stage 4 does is buy time. Usually 5 to 15 years. And while the empire is focused on external resource grabs, internal problems accelerate into Stage 5, loss of confidence. This is when you, the regular citizen, start to sense something is wrong. Inflation becomes noticeable. I'm not talking about the CPI reports. I'm talking about the grocery store. I'm talking about your insurance bill. The middle class realizes their savings are losing purchasing power. You work harder, but you get poorer. Meanwhile, the wealth gap widens dramatically. Why? Because the rich own assets, houses, stocks, gold, which go up when money is printed. The poor and middle class own cash and labor, which lose value when money is printed. Social cohesion fractures. Political extremism rises. You see it on the news every night. Everyone is angry. Everyone is looking for someone to blame. But the real signal in Stage 5 is what other governments do. Foreign governments start actively diversifying away from the empire's currency. They don't announce it loudly on CNN. They do it quietly. They do it systematically. Saudi Arabia starts accepting other currencies for oil. China dumps U.S. treasuries. Central banks buy gold at record rates. The reserve currency status, which provided us with enormous privilege, begins to crack. This leads to the most dangerous phase of all. Stage 6. Fiscal dominance. This is a technical term, but you need to understand it because it is going to determine your financial future. Fiscal dominance happens when the national debt gets so large that the interest payments consume the entire government budget. The central bank, the Fed, faces an impossible choice. Option A. Raise interest rates to fight inflation. But if they do that, the interest on the $38 trillion debt becomes unpayable, and the government goes bankrupt. Option B. Keep rates low to save the government. But if they do that, inflation explodes because real rates are negative. This is the trap. The government's debt is so massive that it dominates monetary policy. Janet Yellen warned about this. The bond market is screaming about this. We are entering Stage 6. And Stage 7? That is the collapse and reset. The final stage is either hyperinflation or default. The currency becomes worthless or it is reissued. The system resets. Wealth that was stored in the dying currency evaporates. Generational savings are destroyed in months. But, and this is the key, wealth that was stored in hard assets, gold, silver, productive land, strategic resources, explodes in value relative to the collapsing currency. This is the great wealth transfer. It is the transfer of value from those who trusted the paper to those who understood the pattern. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, but America is different. We have the military. We have the technology. We have the strongest economy in history. Let me tell you something that history proves over and over again. Exceptionalism is just a story empires tell themselves before they fall. Rome had the most powerful military in the world. They had paved roads, aqueducts, legal systems that we still use today. They seemed eternal. But in 64 AD, Nero started debasing the silver denarius. By 265 AD, the coin had 0.5% silver left. Prices exploded by 1,000%. The soldiers demanded higher wages because the money was worthless. The economy collapsed. The wealth transferred to those holding land and gold. Rome fell. Look at the Dutch Empire in the 1600s. Amsterdam was the New York City of its day. The guilder was the world's reserve currency. They invented the stock market. The Dutch East India Company was worth $7.9 trillion in today's money. But they got overextended. They fought too many wars. To pay for them, the Bank of Amsterdam started secretly lending out the gold that was supposed to back the currency. When the smart money, the merchants and bankers realized the vault was empty, they fled. They moved their capital to London. The guilder collapsed. The Dutch Golden Age ended. Look at the British Empire. The sun never sets on the British Empire. The pound sterling was the king for 200 years. But 2 world wars bankrupted them. By 1931, they had to abandon the gold standard. By 1967, they devalued the pound by 14% overnight. Imagine waking up and your bank account is worth 14% less. Britain went from ruling the world to begging the IMF for a bailout in 1976.3 empires. Different centuries. Different technologies. Same pattern. Same stages. Same outcome. Now, let's look at the scoreboard today. Let's look at the data without emotion. The United States established the current system in 1944. The dollar was backed by gold. We were stage 1. We built the welfare state in the 60s. Stage 2. We broke the gold peg in 1971. Stage 3. And now? Our national debt is growing by $2.5 billion per hour. We are paying $4.25 million in interest every single minute. Interest payments on the debt are now the single largest line item in the federal budget. And look at the behavior of this smart money. In 2025, we saw the highest number of millionaires relocating internationally in history. 142,000 high-net-worth individuals left the system. The UK is losing wealthy citizens. China is losing wealthy citizens. Where are they going? The UAE, Singapore, Switzerland. Places with fiscal stability and rule of law. This is capital flight. This is the insiders sensing the instability and moving their assets to safer jurisdictions. Meanwhile, look at who is selling U.S. stocks. Jeff Bezos. Mark Zuckerberg. The Walton family. Warren Buffett is sitting on the largest pile of cash in Berkshire Hathaway's history. Why are they selling billions of dollars of assets at all-time highs? Because they know stage 6 is coming. They know that when the government gets desperate, they change the rules. They implement capital controls. They increase taxes. They seize assets. The smart money is getting out of the burning building before the fire alarm rings. The Venezuela raid was the bell ringing. It was the empire saying, we need resources. It is a temporary fix. Even if we pump every drop of Venezuelan oil, it doesn't solve the $38 trillion debt problem. It doesn't solve the $150 trillion in unfunded liabilities for Social Security and Medicare. It just buys a little more time. So, the question is, what do? Most people will do nothing. They will suffer from normalcy bias. They will think it won't happen in my lifetime, or the government will fix it. But the math doesn't care about your normalcy bias. The pattern is absolute. If you want to survive the coming transfer, you need a protocol. You need a strategy that protects you from the double bind of inflation and asset bubbles. Here is what history tells us works. Here is your survival strategy. First, you need a hard asset anchor. You cannot hold 100% of your wealth in anything that can be printed. If a politician or a central banker can click a button and create more of it, you do not want it as your primary store of value. You need gold. You need silver. These are not investments. They are insurance. They are wealth that exists outside the financial system. Historically, during every Stage 7 collapse, gold has been the primary vehicle for preserving purchasing power. And yes, you need to look at Bitcoin. It is the digital equivalent of gold, a bearer asset with a mathematically finite supply that is portable across borders. It is the fire exit from the traditional banking system. Second, you need to understand the debt jubilee strategy. In an inflationary crisis, not all debt is bad. You need to distinguish between good debt and bad debt. Bad debt is variable rate debt, credit cards, adjustable rate mortgages, student loans with floating rates. If interest rates spike to 15% or 20% to fight inflation, which has happened before, this debt will destroy you. Pay it off immediately. Good debt is long-term, fixed-rate debt. If you have a 30-year mortgage at a low rate, do not pay it off early. Why? Because inflation is your friend here. You are paying the bank back with dollars that are worth less and less every year. You are essentially shorting the dollar. The bank is subsidizing your asset. Third, you need geographic optionality. This sounds extreme to some people, but it is standard practice for the wealthy. Do not have 100% of your life, your assets, and your legal standing in one single country. If the US dollar collapses or capital controls are implemented, you need options. Open a foreign bank account. Look at jurisdictions that respect private property. If you have the means, look into a second residency or passport. You want the option to exit. You want to be a citizen of the world, not a serf of one failing economy. Fourth, you need to build supply chain sovereignty. We saw in 2020 how fragile the system is. In a Stage 4/5 scenario, global trade disrupts. Imports stop. Prices for basic goods skyrocket. Invest in tangible necessities. Do you have a deep pantry? Do you have energy independence, solar generators? Do you have access to clean water? This isn't about being a doomsday prepper. It's about being a rational logistics manager for your family. If the trucking system pauses for a week, you shouldn't be panicking. You should be comfortable. Fifth, invest in human capital. This is the one asset that cannot be confiscated or inflated away. In the Weimar Republic hyperinflation in Germany, the people who suffered most were the paper pushers, the bureaucrats, the clerks, the middle managers. The people who survived were the ones who could do things. Farmers, mechanics, doctors, carpenters, engineers. Invest in your skills. Learn how to create value. Learn how to solve real problems. In a crisis, competence is the ultimate currency. And finally, you must control your information. Stop watching the mainstream news. They are designed to keep you calm while the ship sinks. They will tell you inflation is transitory. They will tell you the banks are strong. They will tell you the Venezuela raid is about democracy. You need to look at the raw data. Follow the bond market. Watch what the central banks are doing, not what they're saying. The person who survives is the person who sees the iceberg before the captain announces it. We are living through history. The January 3rd operation in Venezuela was not a random event. It was a marker. It was a signpost on the road to Stage 6. The empire is moving from financial power to kinetic power. The wealth transfer has begun. Most people won't see it until it's too late. They will trust the system, they will believe the narrative, and they will watch their savings evaporate. History says this is inevitable. The math says this is inevitable. But you have a choice. You can ignore the pattern and hope this time is different. Or you can accept the reality, understand the cycle, and position yourself accordingly. The wealth isn't disappearing. It's just moving. It's moving from paper to hard assets. It's moving from the unaware to the prepared. It's moving from the past to the future. The only question is, which side of the transfer will you be on? I'm going to be tracking every step of this cycle on this channel. The indicators are moving fast, and you need to stay ahead of them. In my next update, I'm going to break down the specific signals in the bond market that will tell us exactly when the fiscal dominance phase officially begins, the point of no return. You do not want to miss that. Subscribe now. Hit the notification bell. The clock is ticking. The pattern is absolute. Don't be a victim of the cycle. Be a master of it. I'll see you in the next one.